Hey everyone, welcome to Vox Talks. I have been watching some 11th edition previews, and in fact there's a live stream going on right now for the first ever 11th edition game to really be broadcasted, and it's really exciting. And it got me thinking, I hope that there are a bunch of people that are considering getting into this game. And if you are, this is for you. Actually, let me go ahead and kind of be a little bit more honest. This is for people who have an army and they're finally looking to play their first game of Warhammer 40K. And maybe they're waiting for 11th edition to go ahead and play their first one. But even though I started playing this game in 10th edition, I've got some useful advice and some tips that I think will help translate and just give you a really positive experience for your first game. So I want to set down some ground rules before we get into it. What is my intention of kind of the value proposition for watching this whole video? Well, I think the first thing that I have is for you to have a good time. I want you to be able to go out and have fun when you play this game, and I want you to have a positive experience, because to be honest with you, I hope almost every other player in this community wants to see the community grow. And the way we do that is by sharing our advice and making sure that newcomers have a positive experience. With that being said, the second big thing I want to make sure that I can help accomplish is saving you time. Warhammer 40K is a game that takes, in my opinion, at least 100 hours to build, paint, and learn how to play. And that all happens before your first ever game. Now, this was just my experience, but I do think it has a pretty high barrier of entry. Just from the cost, the idea of, hey, I'm not a painter. I went ahead and I talked about some of that stuff in my first video, but instead, let me go ahead and just focus back because I'm really excited to talk to you all about all this. What is my first tip for somebody that's looking to play their first game of Warhammer 40K? Starting with number one, know your rules. Now, when I say know your rules, I don't mean that you have to have the entire codex memorized and you have to know by heart every single phase of the turn. Instead, what I mean is be familiar with your units and kind of have some general things that you should probably be prepared with down packed. Now, what are those things? What are those general things that you should always kind of know that help just speed up the game? Because what I'm trying to avoid is having you have to go into your app or the piece of paper that you printed on for your rules and constantly relaying back or flipping through your codex to know oh wait, what's his move characteristic? What's his toughness? What's his save? Once you just study your army a little bit, you can kind of generalize and know all that pretty quickly. So for example, let's say I was playing Space Marines. I know that pretty much all of my infantry moves 6 inches. All of them have a general toughness of 4. And unless they're a special character, they typically have a save of a 3-up with no invulnerable. Now again, this is just one caveat in a game that has so many different examples to pick and pull from. But what I'm trying to do here is make sure that you have this kind of core fundamental understanding of your army and the key things kind of locked in. What I like to do is almost just use a flashcard style of when I'm scrolling through the app and I see the data sheet, I see how many pieces of facts about it I can name, right? For example, a Ballistus Dreadnought. I know a Ballistus Dreadnought moves 8 inches. I know it's toughness 10. I know it has a 2-up save with no invulnerable. And it has an OC characteristic of 4. Why is it good for me to know all that stuff right off the top? Because the person across the table from me is gonna ask. And it's just one of those things that if I can shave the 20 to 30 seconds finding that in the rule book, those 20 to 30 seconds quickly snowballs into minutes on the table, into potentially 20, 30 minutes being saved, maybe even an hour worth of kind of gameplay saved. The reason why I stress this as the first point is because when you first start playing this game, it's going to take a long time. Games are going to run long and slow. I think most of my games when I first started were averaging 5 to 6 hours. And to be honest with you, I was getting sick of 6-hour long games. So I took it upon myself to learn my rules. And I also had some other things that I streamlined, which is kind of what ultimately led me down to being a little bit more interested in competitive play. But that's not what this video is about. Let's go ahead and shift gears and talk about tip number 2. having useful tools. Now, when I say having useful tools, I'm actually referring to physical tools that you bring. There are two things that we know we need in order to play this game beyond, of course, the miniatures and the table and yada yada. We need to bring dice and we need to bring a tape measure. That's pretty clear and everybody really understands that. But one of the really useful things that I also like to use is a dice tray. Dice trays help speed up the game and just help keep everything neat and organized, and you can intentionally tell where it is I'm rolling and when. And they also prevent just rolling on cockeyed and uneven surfaces. Right now, I'm thinking back to when I first started playing the game, and I had some weird experiences where some folks would maybe throw their dice behind a piece of terrain and I can't really see it. Not to call them liars, but I'm calling them a liar. And then I would also see folks that would say oh, that's a cocked die. And it was just a little bit not completely flat, but they had chose to roll it on an unflat surface. These are all just things that I think just help prevent kind of those awkward scenarios and keeps everybody honest. And the way that it saves you time is that it really just provides a neat, organized place for you to pick up 20 die and just drop them all in the pile, as opposed to picking up 20 die and maybe one of them awkwardly slips out of your hand, falls and rolls off the ground, or maybe lands on the table and you're like, wait, I didn't mean to roll that die. Do I count it? Yes or no? Right? Whereas if you just establish the ground rule, hey, I'm gonna roll everything in the dice tray. If anything bounces out of it or I miss it, doesn't count, doesn't matter the result. I'm gonna pick it up, re-roll it. That's how I roll. That's something that I do, and honestly most people do, especially if you're kind of playing in a little bit more of a competitive and streamlined state. And it's just a really good practice that I suggest that you implement. The second tool that I suggest you bring are measurement tools. So for example, I'll go ahead and I'll show some on some B-roll footage, but 2-inch, 3-inch, 6-inch, 9-inch, 12-inch measurement tools, these gauges is what they're called, are super useful because they help speed up the process of grabbing quick measurements. For example, I used that reference earlier when I said, hey, I know most of my army moves 6 inches. Well, instead of just pulling a tape measure out and kind of awkwardly fumbling it around, putting a 6-inch measuring tool down just helps me speed up and move my model so much faster. The other thing that I like to use it for is it keeps people honest. Hey, how far is this charge? Or what's the distance that I have to, kind of make sure that I need to screen out for my 9-inch bubble. It's soon to become an 8-inch bubble when we go over to 11th edition for denying reserves and deep strikes. Putting those gauges down and using them as effective measurements really just helps speed up the process for everything. Maybe we'll talk in a different video about why reserves matter and how to play around that, but until I get questions like that, we'll maybe save that for a later day. And then the third and final really helpful piece, or actually, sorry, not the final, but the third tool I suggest you bring is a line measurement tool. Laser line tools are great for helping draw a line of sight, and they really help speed up the debate of, well, can you see me or can't? I just point this laser down, it clearly shows from point A to point B, and it helps stop the conversation kind of dead in the tracks, or rather the debate dead in its tracks. And then the final thing I like to use are gauge counters, or wound counters, excuse me. These wound counters are great because they track exactly how many wounds something has left. I don't like to use die to keep it tracked because a die can mean 1,000 different things. Was that unit battle shocked? Is there some type of buff or debuff that's currently sitting on it? It's just one of those things that they're pretty cheap. I play a lot of vehicles or big monsters, and it's just one of those things that helps, I think, keep track of the game and prevents any awkward things of, oh wait, did this person take damage or didn't they? Or were they at 9 or 10 wounds? This is just a great way to really tick down and use that wound counter. Going into tip number 3, setting your expectations. This is your first game, and I want you to have a good time. And the best way that you can set yourself up for success is by letting the person that you're kind of entering into this social contract with also know that it's your first game. Maybe it could be a coaching match. Maybe it's just a 1,000 point game that I really recommend starting with. Or even the combat patrol, which is a really good way to just kind of get a gauge and kind of a soft understanding of how to play and interact with these models, so that way you understand kind of how to have a positive experience and how to ultimately play this game. What you don't want to have happen is the awkward scenario where maybe you show up and the person across the table has a different kind of thing that they wanted to get out of it. right? Maybe they do play competitively, or maybe this is just a narrative game and they don't really care about rules and they're just kind of doing odd things, or they're going to play with a twist. You know, a twist is like a fun, random, like narrative element that you can just kind of do crazy, wonky things with. There's no right or wrong when it comes to any of this stuff, but the reason why I get so passionate when I talk about it is because I didn't really have some great experiences when I first started this game. In fact, I remember when I was kind of just first really trying to like crack the scene of understanding competitive play, I was learning and still very much figuring out the army, and the person across the table from me was like very much denying my ability to do things because I maybe forgot one thing or the other. And don't get me wrong, it's important for you to police yourself, and having these lessons get established is a great way that you never make the mistake to repeat them again. But I had failed to set the expectation with the person I was playing across the table from that I was still learning what the hell I was doing, and I did not walk away having a lot of fun. So, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that you're building your models, you're learning the rules, you're reaching out on Discord or maybe just some buddies that you know in person, and you're getting some games scheduled. I hope this was super helpful for you, and I want to say thanks again for stopping by the channel. Have a good day. Bye.